I have to be honest with you, when I saw the stack of documents for this week, I hesitated. I actually considered asking if we could maybe swap topics.
I can see that. I really can.
Because on the surface, this looks like we are about to just, walk barefoot into the middle of a minefield.
It does look that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the title alone, Beyond the Smokescreen, a more nuanced perspective on the gender debate, that's enough to make most people just close the tab or, turn off the radio.
Right. We're just conditioned now to think that any conversation about gender it's just going to be a shouting match.
An instant shouting match.
Exactly. And I'm so tired of the shouting matches. I think everyone is. But then I started reading the source material, specifically this final draft, and you can see the thought process in the earlier versions, like Beyond the Culture War. And I realized something.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't a political manifesto. It's not trying to get you to vote a certain way. It feels more like a deconstruction project.
That is a perfect way to put it. A deconstruction project. The author of these texts isn't trying to win a debate. Not at all. They're trying to take the debate apart, piece by piece, to show us how the machinery actually works.
The machinery behind the shouting.
Exactly. And the mission, if we want to call it that, is surprisingly philosophical. It's a plea for a ceasefire, but not the kind where everyone suddenly agrees and holds hands. It's more like a ceasefire on the reflex to shout.
Just a pause.
Yes.
Sure.
Just pause for a second so we can actually look at what we're saying. What do we mean when we use words like man, woman, biology, or identity?
Right. And the text makes a promise early on. It promises to find nuance. Now, usually when someone says nuance, it just means they're too afraid to take a side.
Yeah, it's become a bit of a cop-out word.
It has. But here, the author is carving out a very specific space. It's a space right between the two loudest voices in the room. You have the rigid traditionalism on one side, it's just biology, end of story crowd. And then you have the modern identity politics on the other. It's whatever I say it is at any given moment crowd.
And standing in the middle of those two crowds is a very lonely, very quiet place to be.
It is. But that's where we're going today. We're going to try to occupy that space and see what it looks like. But before we get into the heavy philosophy, and there is some heavy philosophy coming up, I want to start with the hook the author uses.
Okay.
It's a question that I think most of us have felt, even if we haven't said it out loud. Why is it that the moment you bring up the concept of gender, just the abstract idea of it, the conversation immediately, like a magnet, pivots to restrooms and sports?
It's the reflex. It's almost Pavlovian at this point. You say gender,
right,
and the culture just screams bathrooms.
But why? Why do we do that? I mean, on one hand, I get it. Those are practical spaces. People care about privacy. They care about fairness in sports. It makes sense to talk about them.
It does make sense, to a degree. Of course it does. But the author's core thesis is that while those debates are real and they impact real people, they are effectively a smokescreen.
A smokescreen? Okay, so that implies they're hiding something.
Precisely. They are distractions.
Yeah.
Or, to use a more psychological term, they are displacements. We are displacing our big anxieties onto these smaller, more manageable battlefields.
Okay, so what's the big anxiety then?
The author argues that we fixate on the plumbing and the podiums because we are terrified of the deeper crisis. And the deeper crisis isn't about where someone pees. It's a crisis of language. It's a crisis of meaning.
That sounds very abstract. A crisis of language. I feel like if I tell a parent who is genuinely concerned about a locker room that they're actually just having a crisis of language, they might, punch me.
And they might be justified in that moment. But hear me out, because the source builds this argument carefully. The author is arguing that the reason the bathroom debate is so hysterical, the reason it feels like the end of the world to people on both sides, is because the bathroom has become the symbolic battleground for a much bigger, much scarier realization.
Yes.
That the words we use to define ourselves, they don't actually work the way we think they do. Our map of the world is wrong.
Okay. I'm listening. That's a big claim.
It is. And the tease here, and this is the part that really, really hooked me, is that to understand gender, we shouldn't be looking at biology textbooks. We should be looking at punk music.
Oh, music.
And the word America.
I saw that in the notes. Gender is like punk.
Wow.
I have to admit, I read that section 3 times. It's such a weird comparison, but the more I sat with it, the more it started to make a strange kind of sense.
It's a brilliant analogy. And we are going to spend a lot of time unpacking that later because it really is the key that unlocks the whole argument. And from there, we're going to look at why both the political left and the political right are using what the author calls psychic defenses to avoid facing the messy reality of that analogy.
Psychic defenses. That sounds intense. Like we're at war with our own brains.
In a way, we are. We're at war with ambiguity.
Okay, before we go all the way down that rabbit hole, we need to do a little bit of housekeeping. We have to set the tone properly here because these documents, they touch on everything. Trans issues, medicalization of youth, government mandates, women's sports. These are not just topics. These are people's lives. These are flashpoints.
Extremely. And it is vital that we clarify our role here.
Right.
We are not here to endorse the author's specific views on any of these policies. We aren't here to tell you who is right or who is wrong about the bathroom bill in your state.
Right. We aren't the judges. We're not delivering a verdict.
We are the guides. Our job is to report on the arguments and the philosophical framework presented in this text. We want to explore the how and the why of the argument itself.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself agreeing, great. If you find yourself disagreeing, also great.
Right.
The goal is to understand the machinery of the argument.
Perfectly said. So let's get into the meat of it, the core tension. The text sets up this battle between fluidity and rigidity, and it starts with what the author calls the common sense paradox. And I'm glad the author started here because it validates where most people are actually coming from.
Yes. The text explicitly acknowledges the traditional view. The author says something like, it is a common sense viewpoint that you just are what you are.
You just are what you are. It's simple, it feels intuitive, and honestly, for 99% of human history, that was enough, wasn't it?
It was. It was the default setting. And the author notes, and this is crucial, that people shouldn't be punished for holding this view. It's not some evil, hateful position that spontaneously appeared. It's a view that had existed for millennia. It's grounded in the variable biological reality of reproduction. It's not hate to notice that biological sex exists.
But, and here comes the big but, the turn.
The counterpoint. The author argues that, despite that traditional view being common sense, it isn't necessarily the whole picture. It's a piece of the picture. The text says it isn't woke or big-brained to observe that gender is floating.
Floating.
That's the word they use, floating. That it isn't simply reducible to one single aesthetic or one single anatomical characteristic.
Yeah.
The text argues that if you actually look at how we behave socially, how we treat people, how we dress, how we speak, gender exists as a contested interplay between these two extremes of fixedness and fluidity.
And this is where the text defines the two problems. I found this really, really helpful for framing the whole discussion. We have the problem of subjectivity on one hand and the problem of fixedness on the other. Let's break those down because I think everyone listening probably falls into one of these traps without realizing it.
Okay, let's unpack the problem of subjectivity first. This is the trap that, according to the source, the modern left often falls into. The author argues that if gender is 100% subjective meaning, if gender is purely whatever you feel like it is in your head at any given moment, with no connection to anything external, then it loses all meaning.
Right. If I say, I am a gender that I just invented 5 seconds ago, and its only characteristic is that I like pizza and blue shirts, that's not a gender. That's just a personality quirk. It's my lunch preference.
Exactly. Language requires consensus. It requires a shared understanding, even a loose one. If I point at a table and say, this is a dog, and you say, no, it's a table, and I say, well, my subjective truth is that it's a dog, communication breaks down entirely.
We can't talk to each other anymore. We can't. If gender is entirely internal, with no external markers or shared social reality, the word gender stops functioning as a tool for communication. It just becomes noise. It's a private language that only one person speaks.
So pure subjectivity dissolves the concept. It just evaporates into meaninglessness. But then you run into the second problem, the problem of fixedness. This is the trap the right tends to fall into.
Yes. And the problem here, as the source puts it, is that fixedness often lays bare its own arbitrariness.
Okay, lays bare its own arbitrariness. That's a bit of a mouthful. What does the author actually mean by that? Let's make that concrete.
Think about the most rigid gender norms you can imagine from, say, 50 years ago, or even 100 years ago. Men don't cry. Women can't be doctors. Men are the providers. Women are the nurturers. Those were treated as fixed rules. They were presented as laws of nature, as solid as gravity.
Right. If a man cried, something was wrong with him. He was broken. But when you look at those rules now, or even if you just interrogate them for a minute, they start to look silly. They look arbitrary. Why can't a man cry? He has tear ducts. Biologically, he is built to cry. The rule is just a social convention we made up.
And why can't a woman wear pants? It's just fabric stitched together in a different shape. There's no law of physics involved.
Exactly. The more you try to nail gender down to a single, rigid, unchanging law, the more obvious it becomes that we just kind of made it up. The rule reveals its own fakeness. It's not a law of nature. It's a rule from a specific social club at a specific time.
So we are stuck. We're caught in this paradox. If it's too fluid, it means nothing. If it's too fixed, it looks fake.
Precisely. We are trapped between meaninglessness and fakeness. And this is where the text makes a really crucial pivot. The author says, this isn't just a political problem. It's not something we can vote our way out of. It is, according to the source, a linguistic reality.
Okay, pause. Linguistic reality. The text mentions structuralism here. And I'm going to be the voice of the listener for a second. My eyes glazed over a little bit. Structuralism sounds like something I definitely slept through in college. Can we make this concrete? What does structuralism have to do with whether I use he or they?
Fair question. Let's simplify it. Think of language as a map and reality as the territory.
Okay, map versus territory. I'm with you.
You can draw a map of a forest. You can label the trees, you can draw the trails, you can mark the elevation, you can make a nice, neat grid. But does that map capture the smell of the pine needles after it rains?
No.
Does it capture the feeling of the wind on your face? The way the light hits the moss at 4 p.m. on an autumn day?
No, of course not. The map is just a representation. It's flat. It's a reduction of the real thing.
Exactly. Structuralism, in a nutshell, is the study of the map. It argues that language is a system, a grid we place over reality to try to make sense of it. But reality, the territory, is always messier, wetter, and more complex than the grid we draw on top of it.
So the word man is a point on the map. It's a label. But the actual living, breathing human being standing in front of you is the territory.
Yes. And the core argument of the text is that for centuries, we have assumed the map was the territory. We got them confused. We thought the word man perfectly and completely captured the biological and social reality of every single man. But now we're realizing there are trees growing where the map says there should be a road.
The territory is rebelling against the map.
It is. The map is out of date. And the text calls this rebellion the excess of language, or the more technical phrase is the excess that escapes signification.
That's the key phrase right there, excess.
That's it. There is always something in human experience that words cannot fully capture. There is always a spillover. You try to put the ocean in a bucket and the water is always going to spill over the rim. That spillover, that's the excess.
And the author argues that gender is absolutely loaded with this excess. We try to put man in a bucket, but there are always things about individual men that don't fit the bucket. We try to put women in a bucket, but the lived experience of being a woman spills out in a million different directions.
And this is where the analogies come in.
Yeah.
Because this is all very abstract.
Yeah.
So to explain this spillover, the author uses two brilliant concrete examples, America and punk.
Okay, let's do this. I want to spend some real time here because this was the aha moment for me in the text. Let's start with America.
Right. So the author asks us to define the word America, not the landmass between Canada and Mexico, but the concept, the idea of America. When we say America, we all nod. We think we know what it means.
Sure. It's the United States. It's the flag. It's the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. It's apple pie, baseball, Hollywood.
It's freedom. It's democracy. It's capitalism. It's a very specific bundle of ideas and associations. But here is the question the text poses. How many of those associations must be present for it to be America?
Okay, I see where this is going. It's the old ship of Theseus problem, right? You replace one plank at a time.
It's exactly that. If you take away freedom, let's say a dictator takes over, the government becomes a totalitarian regime, is it still America?
Geographically, yes. But people would say, this isn't America anymore. They'd say, we lost America, or this isn't the America I grew up in.
Right. But it would still appear on the map as the USA. Okay, what if you take away apple pie?
Still America, just, slightly less delicious.
Okay, what if you take away the land? This is a bit sci-fi, but imagine a catastrophe happens, and all the Americans have to move to a giant space station. But they keep the Constitution, they keep the flag, they keep the culture, they still play baseball in zero-G. Is that space station America?
That's much harder. I'd say, sort of. I mean, it's the American people, the American idea.
Sort of. That's the point. The definition is a bundle of associations. It's a cloud of meaning. It's not one fixed thing like a specific rock or a single document that acts as the linchpin. If you remove one piece, the concept doesn't necessarily collapse, but you also can't point to one single piece and say that is the essential core of America.
It's a vibe.
Scientifically speaking,
Yes.
Yes, it is a vibe. It's a shared hallucination that we all agree to treat as real. It's a story we tell ourselves.
Okay, so that's a country, a nation state. But the text argues gender works exactly the same way. And to prove it, the author brings in punk. This is my favorite part of the whole text.
The punk analogy is even sharper, I think, because people get really, really defensive about it. The author asks, what is punk?
Okay, let's build the God Platonist ideal of a punk rocker. What's in the bundle?
Go for it. Lay it out.
Okay, leather jacket, definitely. Safety pins somewhere. A mohawk, or at least some kind of aggressive haircut. Listening to the Ramones, the Sex Pistols, the Clash. They hate the government.
Ah.
They have a DIY, anti-corporate ethos. They probably, don't shower quite enough.
A perfect image. We can all see it in our heads. Now let's start stripping things away, just like we did with America. Take away the leather jacket, put them in a nice, tailored, three-piece suit. But they still hate the government, they still listen to the Clash on vinyl, and they still live in a squat. Are they punk?
I mean, yeah, I'd say so. That's almost like corporate punk or some kind of ironic subversive punk. In fact, wearing a suit in a room full of leather jackets might be the most punk thing you can do.
Okay, good point. So keep the suit. Now take away the music. They exclusively listen to Mozart. They think the Ramones are just noise. But they organize anti-establishment protests. They believe in anarchy. They have the confrontational attitude. Are they punk?
Ooh, that's harder. I'd call them an anarchist, maybe a radical. But the word punk feels like it needs the music. The music feels pretty central to the bundle.
Does it? I mean, Sid Vicious couldn't really play bass. Was he not punk?
That's a low blow.
Well,
but,
yeah.
but a fair point. He had the attitude, the look.
He had other parts of the bundle. Okay, let's try one more. What about a kid in the suburbs? He loves the music. He buys the band T-shirts at the mall. He's got the haircut. But he loves his parents. He gets good grades. And he follows all the rules. Is he punk?
That's a poser. That's what we used to call them. He's not a real punk.
But he's listening to the music.
Mhm.
He has what you just called the essential element.
But he doesn't have the spirit. He doesn't have the DIY ethos or the anti-establishment politics. He's just wearing the costume.
So is punk the music? Or is it the spirit? Is it the clothes or the politics?
It's messy. It's all of those things, and none of them at the same time. You can't pin it down. If you try to write a rule book for punk, you've killed it.
And that is the aha moment. The source argues gender operates exactly the same way. It is, and I love this phrase, an absurd bundle of masculine and feminine norms. Being a man or a woman involves this cloud of associations. How you dress, how you speak, how you act, your biology, your role in the family, your hobbies.
But you can't pin being a man or a woman down to just one of those norms.
You can't. You can't say being a man is just having a beard. Because some men don't have beards, and some women do.
And you can't say being a woman is just about wearing dresses and being nurturing. That's a stereotype from the 1950s.
And the text argues you can't even say being a woman is just about having XX chromosomes, because the social reality of womanhood, the way it is lived and experienced and treated in the street, is about more than a lab result. When you see someone on the street who looks like a woman, dresses like a woman, acts like a woman, you say she. You don't demand a DNA test before you choose a pronoun. You are reacting to the cloud, the bundle of associations, not the biological rock.
And the text points out the temptation here. It says, it is much easier to point to sex and call it a day.
It is so much easier. It's clean, it's tidy, it's a binary switch, 0 or 1. But the author argues that simply isn't how the social field or language actually works in practice. We are trying to force a messy, nebulous cloud into a neat little square box.
And when you try to force a cloud into a box, people get stressed out. Which brings us to the next major section of this deep dive, psychic defenses.
Yes. This is where we move from linguistics to psychology. Why is the culture war so hot? Why are people screaming at each other on the internet? Why does it feel like the world is ending because someone used a different pronoun?
The source has a theory on this. It's not just, simple bigotry, and it's not just wokeness. It's something much deeper, much more primal.
It is. The source argues that people use gender as part of their meaning-making apparatus. Think of it like a load-bearing wall in your psyche. It's one of the primary tools we use to orient ourselves in the world. I am a man, therefore I do X. I am a woman, therefore I do Y. It gives us a script.
So when that meaning is threatened, when the excess starts spilling out and things get ambiguous and the script doesn't make sense anymore, people freak out.
They feel a psychic need, as the text puts it, to grab hold of something solid, to categorize, to label, to smooth over the messiness. They cannot deal with the ambiguity. It feels like an existential threat. If I don't know what a man is, do I really know who I am?
And this is where the author critiques both the left and the right. And I want to emphasize, the source is pretty equal opportunity in its critique here. It's not picking a side. Let's start with the right strategy according to the source. What's their psychic defense?
The right strategy is described as the denial of fluidity.
Denial. Just pretend the mess doesn't exist.
Exactly. The mechanism is to insist that gender is simply sex. End of discussion. Biology is destiny. Close the case file.
Which, as we established, is the easier path. It's the path of least resistance for our brains.
Right. But the goal, psychologically, according to the source, is to eliminate that excess that escapes our categories. If they can insist that biology equals destiny, they can maintain a sense of order in a world that feels increasingly chaotic. The source views this as a defense mechanism against the fear of social disorder. If gender is fluid, what else is fluid? Is the family fluid? Is the nation fluid? Is truth itself fluid? That's a terrifying thought for a conservative worldview that values structure and stability.
Okay, so that's the right. They want to close the box and take a shot. Now let's look at the left. Because
Right.
usually we think of the left as the ones embracing the fluidity, opening the box. But the source argues the left has its own, very different form of psychic defense.
This is the most challenging part of the text for me, but I think also the most insightful. The source argues that the left's strategy is creating a new rigid taxonomy.
A new taxonomy. So instead of one box, they just make 50 smaller boxes.
Essentially, yes. The mechanism is a certain form of identity politics. The source critiques the left for critiquing the old rigid norms only to immediately enforce new, equally rigid ones.
The text gives specific examples here, and this is where it gets controversial. It mentions terms like birthing people or the proliferation of neopronouns like zizzer.
Right. And the critique isn't just that these words are new or that some people find them annoying. The critique is deeper. It's that they take the form of what the author calls a natural pathology.
Natural pathology. Okay, that's another dense phrase. Can we break that down?
Think of it like this. You know that one drawer everyone has in their kitchen that's just full of junk?
Yeah.
Rubber bands, old batteries, twist ties, loose change, a single key to a lock you lost years ago.
The junk drawer.
Yeah.
I know it well. My mortal enemy.
Okay. The right looks at that drawer and says, this is chaos. This is disorder. Throw it all out. Only keep the forks and knives in their proper slots. That's their defense. They want purity, order. The left, according to this argument, looks at that drawer and says, this chaos needs a system. So they go to the container store. They buy a plastic organizer with 100 tiny little slots. They make a label for AA batteries, a label for AAA batteries, a label for blue rubber bands, a label for red rubber bands, a label for slightly stretched out rubber bands.
So they're trying to organize the chaos into a perfect system.
Yes, but here's the problem. They're trying to treat every single item in that junk drawer as if it is a distinct scientific species that needs its own category. They're trying to turn the excess, the beautiful organic messiness of human behavior into a rigid science. You aren't just a person who feels a bit masculine today. You are a demi-boy. You aren't just a tomboy. You are non-binary transmasculine.
They're replacing one big cage with 100 tiny, very specific cages.
Exactly. And the source argues that this is also a defense mechanism against ambiguity. It's a way to try to control the excess by naming it, by categorizing it. If we can name every single permutation, we can tame it. If we have a flag and a label for it, it's not scary and chaotic anymore. It's part of a neat and tidy system.
So the synthesis here, the author's big conclusion on this point, is that both sides are fundamentally doing the same thing, just with different tools.
They are opposite sides of the same psychic coin. Both sides are desperately trying to resolve a linguistic instability that language, by its very nature, cannot actually capture. They're both trying to build a dam against a river that refuses to stop flowing. Neither side can just sit with the river and let it flow.
That is actually kind of sympathetic to both sides in a strange way. It frames the anger not as malice, but as anxiety. It humanizes the culture war. It's not just those people are evil, it's those people are terrified of ambiguity. And frankly, so am I sometimes. Ambiguity is deeply...
It is. We crave certainty. Our brains are prediction machines. We want to know what things are so we know how to react to them.
Which brings us full circle back to the title of the main document, Beyond the Smokescreen. We've talked about the philosophy, the map, and the territory. We've talked about the psychology, the fear of the junk drawer. Now we have to talk about the distraction, the pivot to practicality.
The pivot, the smoke screen itself.
As we mentioned in the intro, the author observes that conversations on what is gender almost always, almost immediately, pivot to these practical battles. Restrooms, children, sports. And I challenged you on this earlier. I said those things matter to people.
And they do. They absolutely do.
But the source views them as ulterior motives. Is that fair? If I ask you about the philosophy of gender and you immediately start yelling about locker rooms, the author is saying you are using the locker room to avoid the harder, more abstract philosophical difficulty.
Right. It's just easier to debate the height of a hurdle in a track meet than it is to debate the ontology of womanhood.
Yeah.
One is concrete, the other is, well, it's the stuff we've been talking about for the last half hour. It's dizzying.
But the author doesn't just dismiss these issues, do they? They don't just say, stop talking about bathrooms and get over it.
No, and that's key to the whole nuanced perspective. The author doesn't say these issues don't matter. The author says we need a more nuanced perspective on them, a middle ground that refuses to be hysterical or absolutist.
Let's talk about that middle ground, because this
Yeah.
is where the rubber meets the road. The text calls it an integrated perspective on skepticism. What does that mean in practice?
This is where the source really tries to thread the needle. The core argument is this: it is possible to accept the reality of gender fluidity without requiring rigid acceptance of what the text calls prefigured stances.
Can you give us an example from the text?
Sure. Medicalization. This is probably the hottest of the hot buttons. The source argues that one can be skeptical of the medical regime regarding trans-identifying youth. You can recognize the need for caution, especially with young people who might have a shaky or confused self-identity, without being a monster.
So saying, maybe we should slow down and do more research on puberty blockers for teenagers doesn't automatically make you a transphobe in this framework.
Correct. But, and here's the all-important nuance, you can hold that skepticism and also recognize the validity of trans people and the reality of gender fluidity. You don't have to adopt the extreme stance of transition every child immediately, or the other extreme stance of trans people don't exist and this is all a fad.
You can be a skeptic and an ally at the same time, or at least not an enemy.
Or at least, you can be a skeptic and an acceptor of social reality. The source says you aren't required to adopt an extreme, pre-packaged political stance to be an accepting person. You can say, I believe trans people exist, I believe gender is fluid, and there are serious questions about the long-term effects of these medical interventions on kids. Those thoughts can coexist in one brain.
That seems incredibly reasonable, but reasonable often gets drowned out in the shouting. Let's look at the specific test cases the text provides to apply this thinking. First up, women's sports. This is probably the most contentious practical debate right now. What is the source's stance here?
The source takes a very specific, decentralized approach. The argument is, unless there is a direct safety issue that needs government regulation like literal physical danger in a contact with sports, sports institutions themselves should work this out, not the government.
So keep the politicians out of the penalty box. Let the sports leagues make the rules for their own sports.
Exactly. Let the Olympic Committee decide for the Olympics. Let the local high school swim league decide for their league. And the author offers a really important reality check here. Even with a commitment to inclusivity, there will be boundaries and rules. There will be categories. That's what sports are.
And there will be bias and unfairness.
And bias and unfairness. It won't be a perfect system. But the source argues, and I think this is a critical quote, that a decision at the Olympic level does not foreclose the rights of non-binary or trans people to operate in society.
That's a strong and important distinction. Losing a spot on a podium, while devastating for an athlete, is not the same thing as losing your right to exist in public.
Right. It frames sports as a specific regulated activity, a game with its own rules that is separate from general human rights. You can have strict, even controversial rules inside the game without stripping people of their dignity once they walk off the field.
Okay, now the other big one, the ultimate smokescreen, restrooms. What's the deep dive on restrooms?
This is where the smokescreen concept really comes into play. The source argues that the bathroom issue is actually about something much, much bigger. The ability to operate as gender nonconforming in public.
It's not about the toilet, it's about the right to be in the room in the first place without being challenged.
Correct. And the source makes a very practical, almost libertarian argument here regarding policing. And I think this is an argument that should appeal to people on both the left and the right. The text argues that trying to police bathrooms, to check IDs, to inspect people's appearances, is a bigger problem for both gender-conforming and non-conforming people than the alternative.
I can see that. I mean, how do you actually enforce a biological sex-only bathroom law? Do you put a guard at the door? Do they check birth certificates? That seems insane.
Or worse, do they do visual inspections? Ma'am, you don't look feminine enough to use this restroom. Exactly. The moment you start policing bathrooms, you're going to have women who look masculine, Maybe they have short hair. Maybe they're tall. Maybe they're a cancer patient who lost their hair. Maybe they just don't wear makeup getting harassed and challenged, even if they are cisgender.
We've already seen dozens of stories just like that.
Precisely. It creates a surveillance state in what should be a private space. Now, the source admits there are complexities. It specifically mentions locker rooms where not everyone is a mature, discreet adult. The author isn't naive, but the overall argument is for a practical stance over a moral panic. It's a utilitarian argument. Which path causes the least amount of total harm and social disruption?
So we've covered the philosophy, the psychology, and the practical battlegrounds. Now I want to zoom out to what the text calls the integrated perspective, the solution. If we accept that the map is wrong, if we accept that the junk drawer is always going to be messy, and if we accept that we probably shouldn't be policing the bathrooms, what do we actually do? What does this look like day to day?
The solution, such as it is not very satisfying if you're looking for a new slogan to put on a t-shirt.
It never is on this show, is it?
The author admits that their version of common sense is a messy mix. It's a combination of what they call progressive and conservative coded answers, depending on the specific topic you're looking at.
So you might end up sounding conservative on sports, but progressive on pronouns.
Or skeptical on medicalization, but anti-regulation on bathrooms. The realization the author forces you, the listener, to confront is this: you are not going to please everyone. You cannot wear a clean jersey for Team Red or Team Blue if you take this nuanced approach. You'll be in the messy middle.
And if you take this nuanced path, the right will call you a radical woke activist, and the left will call you a transphobic bigot.
The author explicitly says that.
Yeah.
There's a line where they write, "I am afraid to communicate what I think, lest I be skewered alive."
That is deeply, deeply relatable. I think most people are in that boat. They have complicated, mixed views, but they are afraid to say them out loud because they don't fit the approved script from either side.
It is. But the plea, the core request of the text, is for acceptance without extremism. It's about acknowledging fluidity, which, as the author notes, is visible in much less extreme examples than just the trans category, like tomboys or men who like art, without enforcing those rigid natural pathology labels on everyone.
And resisting the urge to make everything neat and tidy.
Yes, we have to introduce doubt into the clean, simple answers offered by both political sides. The text acknowledges that this complexity is worked out over time, through culture, through conversation. There will be ups and downs. There will be mistakes.
It's not a quick fix. It's not a piece of legislation. It's a messy, slow, awkward evolution of language and society.
Just like punk evolved. Punk in 1976 meant one thing. Punk in 2024, with all its subgenres, means something very different. The word survived the ambiguity.
Just like America evolved.
Exactly. We survive the ambiguity. We don't solve it.
So where does that leave us as we wrap this up?
It leaves us with a challenge, I think. A challenge to our own thinking.
Let's recap the journey because we covered a lot of ground today. We started with the definition of words, how they fail us, how they have this excess that spills over the bucket. We look at the psychology of why that failure makes us so anxious and drives us to political extremes, the psychic defense against the chaos. And then we looked at the practical reality of public spaces where the author argues for a pragmatic, less policed approach.
The central theme, the thread through all of it, remains. Gender is a feature of language that contains an excess which defies rigid categorization.
It's a cloud, not a box.
And try to force the cloud into the box is what's causing the storm.
I love that image. That really clarifies it.
And this brings us to a final provocative thought, a takeaway. The text mentions that fixedness lays bare its own arbitrariness.
Right. The stricter the rule, the more you see it's just made up.
So if we accept that America, punk, and gender are just these bundles of loose associations that we desperately try to glue together, it forces us to ask a really provocative question about everything else.
What's that?
What other parts of our identity or our society are we treating as fixed laws of nature when they're actually just messy linguistic agreements waiting to be unpacked?
Oh, that is a rabbit hole.
Is it success? You know, we have a checklist for success. Money, house, prestigious job. But if you take away the money, but have a happy family and fulfilling work, are you still successful? The definition is a cloud.
Is it family? We used to have a very rigid definition. Mom, dad, 2 kids. Now we know it's a cloud of associations, love, support, shared history, commitment.
Is it criminal? Is it genius? Is it art?
Is it podcast host?
It's all of it. We're all just Bundles of associations trying to make sense of the territory with a very old, very worn-out map.
That is a lot to mull over. It makes the world feel a little less solid, but maybe, in a way, a little more free.
It does, and that's the point, I think. The goal today wasn't to solve the debate. We didn't solve the bathroom crisis. But hopefully, we helped you understand the machinery behind it.
The machinery of language and the machinery of our own minds.
Precisely.
Well, on that note, we want to thank you for joining us on this exploration of nuance. It's not always comfortable, but it's definitely interesting.
Always.
Keep thinking, keep questioning the labels, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.
Take care.